Hey everybody, I'm On Ball Creator. So this is where I'm at right now with my um, NBA Power Rankings. You can see it here, um, and I'm just going to talk through where I'm at and why I'm ranking the teams where I do, and hopefully you like this video. So number one, Oklahoma City Thunder. I don't think there's too much surprise there. They are the favorites to repeat. Pretty heavy favorites. I mean, they just were so dominating last season, and they have everybody back this season. We'll see how much Nikola Topic plays, because that could make them even better if he's able to be a pretty good player for them. But they're essentially just bringing everybody back, and some of them are young players who are still getting better, um, like Jalen Williams and Chet Holmgren and some others. So they're the heavy favorites. Two, I got 2 through 5. They're all in the same tier. Um, I think you can make debates between these four teams: Cavs, Knicks, Nuggets, and Rockets. If you have them in a different order, that's fine. Personally, I got the Cavs at 2 because they were just really really good last season, and they were like record breaking good, one of the best teams of all time in the regular season. And yeah, they came up short in the playoffs, lost in the second round, but they had like everybody was injured. like mo you know all these guys were injured, like Garland, Mobley, Allen, like Max Strus, like they had a bunch of guys that were hurt. So if they just run it back, and obviously they have good coaching, and that made a big difference for them last season. Um, they run it back, like, and with better health, like I think you can easily make a case that they're the second best team in the league. Knicks at number 3. I think it's pretty debatable. Like, them and the Cavs. Like, yeah, I think the Cavs are a little bit better. But the Knicks obviously did go a little bit further in the playoffs last season. The Knicks were able to beat a really good Celtics team in the playoffs. The Knicks have essentially everybody back. Plus, they've added some bench pieces like Yabusele and Jordan Clarkson. Maybe they keep Brogdon, and Brogdon contributes a little bit off the bench. I'm not expecting a ton from him, but they've looks like they've improved the bench a little bit, and they've brought everybody else back. Um, Obviously, they changed the coach. We don't know if that's going to be better or worse, or maybe be about the same. But I think it's a veteran team that the Knicks have. All those guys are back, and they have a formula that they know works. It got them pretty far. They just kind of came up a little bit short. They ran into a really hot Pacers team, that just got hot at the right time of year. And playoffs are a lot of times about matchups, and it's a lot of times about three things in the playoffs: matchups, and how healthy you are, and who gets hot at the right time of year. And I think the Knicks, when they lost the Pacers in the conference finals last year, maybe part of it was due to coaching. I mean, Carlisle's probably a little bit better coach than Thibodeau, which is maybe part of the reason why they fired Thibodeau. Even though I'm not really sure that Mike Brown's much of an upgrade there. But they ran into a team that was just hot at the right time of year with the Pacers, and the Pacers were also a little bit healthier, I think, as well. Some of the guys on the Knicks were a little bit banged up. So I got Knicks at number 3. Nuggets versus Rockets in that 4-5 spot. I mean, if you got Rockets at 4, again, like, it's some of these that are in the same tier. If they're in the same tier and they're only one spot away from each other, like, it's kind of like splitting hairs. But the Fred VanVleet injury, I do factor in there. I think before that injury, I had the Rockets probably around like 2 or 3. They were definitely in that 2 or 3, maybe at the lowest number 4. Um, I may have actually had them like number 2 before the Van Fleet injury. Obviously a lot's going to be on Reed Shepherd to see, can Reed Shepherd actually like give them some meaningful minutes, like in his second year in the league. And this will basically be the first season that Shepherd is like playing, meaningful minutes. I'm not expecting a ton from him. Like, I'm not expecting him to give you what Fred Van Vliet would have given you. So I think that's definitely, that loss definitely hurts them. I still think, you know, they could be a little bit better than the Nuggets just because, like, Jokic, as good as he is, like, the supporting cast around him isn't that great. Um, with that being said, it is a pretty similar supporting cast that the Nuggets won a championship with. I mean, like, having the Nuggets at 4, like, should not be that much of a hot take. Again, like, it's basically the same team that the Nuggets had when they won a championship. They got Bruce Brown back. They moved Michael Porter Jr. and got Cam Johnson, which is probably a slight upgrade. And they have a pretty similar team to what they had last season. Like, really, the only pieces that aren't there that were on the championship team is Jeff Green and Contavious Caldwell Pope. And like, those are losses, but they've got other guys in there plugged into those spots, like Peyton Watson. Maybe Duran Holmes gives you some good playing time. Julian Strother. Like, I'm not saying they're as good as the championship team that they had. If I did think they were as good as the championship team that they had, I'd have them probably number 2 behind the Thunder. You know, um, but I got them at 4. 2 through 5 is pretty interchangeable. Rockets at 5, even with the Van Vliet injury. I just think they're too good to be below the 5 spot. I think that is a top 5 team in the NBA, especially when you factor in coaching. They have a good coaching staff. Um, I mean, like, a big 3 of Kevin Durant, Şengün, and then, like, I think Amen Thompson is like a good third guy. He's going to be really good this season in year 3. Him as your third guy, Durant and Şengün, like 1A, 1B, basically. Like, that's a really good start to a team. And even with Van Fleet gone, you have some other good pieces in there, like good coaching. Like, they're a top 5 team, I think. Magic at 6. I like the Magic. I think they're a good team. They went for it. They went for it by making that move to bring in Desmond Bain. Um, I think Bain, with Paolo Banchero and Franz Wagner. I mean, that's a really good big 3. Um, Big thing for them to determine how good they can really be this season, is going to be like Jalen Suggs. Is he healthy? Can he come back healthy? Can he get back to where he was before the injury? That'll kind of, play a pretty good factor. But I think, like, their defense is going to be really good. They're going to really be able to shut teams down defensively. And with Bain, they have more offense now. That opens things up with Bain there. That opens things up so there's more space for Paolo and Franz to be able to create and get to the basket. It was tough. Like, people criticize Paolo for his efficiency, but he's a young player. Really high usage players who aren't centers. Like a guard, wing, forward type player who is really young in his first 2 or 3 years in the league, high usage on a team that doesn't really have much spacing and a lot of other creators and scores outside of himself. Not to mention all the injuries to Wagner, and injuries to Paolo himself, and injuries to Suggs and other guys. Like, it's been tough, a really tough team context for Paolo to be efficient. But now he's another year older, another year more developed, hopefully more healthy than he's been in the past couple of years. And with Bane there, like, I'm thinking all three of those guys, Bane, Paolo, and Franz, are all going to be awesome this season. And especially if Suggs can be healthy, the other guys just do their jobs. I think Mosley's a pretty good coach as well. Like, Magic at 6. I know Warriors at 7. That might be a little higher than some people have them. But I just think for a full season, I think with the Warriors ranking that I have, with them at 7, it's not necessarily ranking. That's not necessarily a ranking that's saying this is what their record's going to be. I think that record wise, they might be lower, like 10 or 11 or something, if you just look at where the teams record wise are. And I say that, but like, record wise, they might be lower, like in the 10 to 12 range. But this more so is a ranking. What I've done here is more so a ranking of, like, the teams with the highest odds of winning a championship, the teams with the highest probability of going deep into the playoffs are ranked higher, and lower are teams that have less of a chance at winning a championship, less of a chance of making a deep playoff run, and more of just like having higher lottery odds. Is the teams I ranked lower on this, is more so how I ranked. So, like, Warriors being at 7, I think that they're going to rest a lot of their guys because they're old. They have a lot of old players, so I think they're going to be load managing a lot of their veterans. And also, they play in the Western Conference, which is tougher than the East. So you combine those factors together, tougher Western Conference and old veteran team going to be load managing a lot of their vets. I think their regular season record, might not be that great. They might be a little bit lower on this, like 10 to 12 range record wise. But I think when you get to the playoffs, like, playoff experience matters. Veterans matter. Veteran leadership matters. Guys that have been there and done that, and guys that have won championships, guys that have played in the NBA Finals. Steve Kerr as coach has been there and done that, and a core of, when you look at Steph Curry, Draymond Green, Jimmy Butler, Al Horford, Buddy Hield. I mean, I know Buddy Hield doesn't have a lot of playoff experience, but the guy's a veteran. He's a veteran. He's been there. He's done that. Like, he's been around the league a long time. He's a guy that you can put out there in a playoff setting, and he's not going to mess up. He's going to hit shots. But those other 4 guys have a ton of playoff experience and NBA Finals experience between Steph, Draymond, Butler, and Horford. I know the Horford signing hasn't been made official yet, but for the purposes of these rankings, I kind of did these rankings with the assumption that everybody's assuming for the Warriors, Horford's going to sign, Melton is going to sign, Peyton's going to sign, these guys are going to sign for the Warriors. We all just kind of know that. So I'm just assuming that with this ranking here at the Warriors at 7. Timberwolves are not very far behind. I mean, the Timberwolves are going to be good. I mean, if you've got the Timberwolves at 6, that's fine with me. I'm not going to argue, If you got them at 7, 8, somewhere in that 6 or 7 range, like, that's fine for Timberwolves. I mean, I got them at 8 just because, for reasons I already mentioned, why I'm a little bit higher on the Magic and Warriors. But, with the Timberwolves, I just think, like, I don't know. I mean, I feel like they've had that core there for a while with Edwards and Gobert. And they've tried different things. They've tried other guys and pieces around them, and like I've got them at 8. I think they're a top 8 team in the NBA. But like part of it is like Gobert is kind of getting up there in age. I think at this point in his career, Rudy's going to start to maybe decline a little bit, and they still are relying pretty heavily on Mike Conley at point guard, and Conley obviously is getting really old. I don't know much like how much you can rely on Conley to play point guard at his age, which of course puts a lot of pressure on Rob Dillingham. And I think Rob Dillingham's a good player, but if you're a team that wants to finish higher than 8th in the NBA and have 8 top, if you want to have like top 6 or 7 chances at winning a championship, like Dillingham is small, and it's only his second season. He's only like 19, 20 years old. Like, I don't know. Putting that much pressure on him, and Julius Randle as your number 2 guy, as your number 2, at least on offensive end. I don't know how far a team with Randle as their number 2 option on offense can go. Edwards as your number 1. Edwards is a good player. Like he can be, he can be a top 10, maybe top 5 team. You can maybe have a top 5 team with Edwards as your number 1, but ideally your number 2 and 3 are a little bit better. And like Randall's pretty good as a number 2, but then who's your number 3? Who's your third option on offense? Just throwing lobs to Gobert. I mean, you have DiVincenzo and some other guys that are pretty good, which is why I do have them top 8. I think they're a good team. I think Finch is a pretty good coach. Like, I like the way they play, a tough, gritty style of play. But the loss of Alexander Walker is going to hurt them a bit. That puts pressure on Terrence Shannon. How good is he going to be in year 2? I think there's some questions there about how much higher you can put the Wolves, but how much higher than 8 you can put them. Pistons at 9. I like this ranking. I like putting the Pistons at 9. I think this is fine. I think it's a perfectly fine ranking. I got them in the same tier with the Magic, Warriors, and Wolves. I think the Pistons are going to be good. I think what we saw last year is just kind of the beginning for them. It's the tip of the iceberg. It's the beginning. Like we saw a lot of growth, and that was because obviously what happened last year with the Pistons, they got a lot better. That was one of the biggest single season improvements in NBA history, I think, from one season to the next. And obviously there was a few things at play there. One, they got better coaching. 2, they got better, like roster construction with some of the pieces they brought in, like Hardaway, Beasley, and Harris, giving them some veterans and guys that just know how to play, guys that play with toughness and physicality, and guys that can shoot. I mean, that was big, like kind of just turning around. They gave them some direction as a team and just much better roster construction, better spacing. It was huge. And then the other piece was young guys getting better. Obviously a new young player, Ron Holland, but who got better than the previous year, even though he wasn't in the NBA at the time. But Cade got better, and just natural progression and development for some of their young guys like Cunningham and Asar. Asar was healthier. The year before that as a rookie, he was hurt a lot. So Asar was healthy, and Duren got better. I mean, everything just kind of clicked for them. But I think all of that will just continue on this season. They'll still have better coaching. And, they kind of just kept the same roster. They made some minor adjustments to the roster, of course. It's pretty similar roster to last season with some minor, changes that they made. But I think it's just going to be like development of their young players and just natural progression that's going to, make them a little bit better. And also part of it is like, I got them as the 4th best team in the East. That's a little bit higher than they were last season. that was last season. They were like sixth in the East. Well, now their young guys are going to be better and more developed this season, but also some of the teams that were ahead of them in the Eastern Conference last year, like Boston, Indiana, and Milwaukee, all kind of got a little bit worse. So that kind of opens the door for a team like Detroit to move up a little bit. So I like them at 9. This next group of teams and this tier, Lakers, Clippers, Hawks, Bucks. This is an interesting. This is an interesting tier. Teams that I have in the playoffs, but I don't really see them as title contenders that are gonna. If one of them goes to the conference finals, it's not going to be that shocking. It won't be the most shocking thing that's ever happened. Each of these 4 teams has some pretty good talent. Starting with the Lakers at 10. A team with LeBron and Luka and Austin Reeves as a big 3, that's capable of winning a playoff series against pretty much anybody. When you have that kind of talent and 3 different guys that could just take over a game and just get a bucket at any time. Again, as I mentioned with the Warriors, guys that are veterans, guys that have been there, done that makes a difference. Those types of guys win. And so I got them at 10. And Luka, first full season with the Lakers, he's going to be good. He's in his prime, obviously. DeAndre Ayton is, a guy that, he's a decent starting center. I think defensively, I have some questions about how good this Lakers team is going to be on defense. How good are they going to be on defense, and how much shooting do they have? Do they have enough shooters? Do they have enough defense? What's the chemistry going to be like? Everybody, do they all have roles, or is everybody just kind of looking for the ball in their hands? Those are some questions that I have. And how deep are they besides, outside of the top 5 or 6 guys? Do they have enough depth on the bench? Those are some questions that I have about the Lakers, which is why, I have them at 10, but don't really have them any higher, and I don't have them in the next tier up. Clippers at 11. A team with this much talent, with as much talent that the Clippers have, a good coach like Tyronn Lue, and veterans, guys that are, just veterans that are more developed and just know how to play. And they're a deep team with the talent, the depth and everything, and the coaching. You can't have the Clippers lower than 11, right? So I got them at 11. But I don't know how many games Bradley Beal's going to play. How many games is Chris Paul going to play? How many games is Kawhi Leonard going to play? There's a lot of questions with things like that. So there's questions about some of these older players, how much do they have left in the tank? How many games are they going to play? How many injuries are they going to have? How are some of these new players like Beal and Collins and some of these guys going to gel, and Lopez? Yeah, there's talent. There's a lot, talent and depth and veterans, but how will some of these new guys gel? And will they accept their roles? Do they have a role? How will it all fit? So I got them at 11. I think they could be a really good team. It wouldn't shock me if they go to the second round of the playoffs, maybe even conference finals. They're going to be tough. They're going to win some games. At 12, I got the Hawks. I got the Hawks. I got them as the 5th best team in the East, 12th overall. I think that's pretty fair for the Hawks. I think this is a really good team. I think they're good. They have some talent. They got some good pieces, during the offseason with Alexander Walker, with Luke Kennard, and, some other guys, obviously Kristaps Porzingis. So, this is a team with that amount of talent and depth. You got size, you got shooting. You got Reece Shay's probably going to be a bit better than he was as a rookie, and Jalen Johnson's probably going to take a step, to be possibly an all-star this season. And Trae Young with more, he's got guys that can play around him and take the pressure off him, so he doesn't have to do as much. Like that can help him to be more efficient, and maybe a little bit better defensively. Although I don't know about that. How good can they be defensively with a guy like Trae Young out there playing such heavy minutes? How good are they going to be like with Porzingis? How much is he going to play? Um, he's hurt a lot, whether it's illnesses and injuries. I don't know how much they can really count on Porzingis. Those are a couple of questions that I have and then also just a lot of new players. How is everything going to fit? But I think Dyson Daniels is probably, he's still young. He's going to take another step. He's going to take another step. He's going to be really good. There's talent here. Nikola Durisic could provide some decent, minutes for them off the bench. I think having like him and Kennard kind of competing, along with some other guys competing for some minutes off the bench, like they have some good depth at the wing position with Johnson and Risa Shea. I mean, there's depth. They have depth up front with Porzingis, and you got Okongwu, and you got Mohamed Gay, and you got Asa Newell. You got a lot of guys up front. You got a lot of wings. You got guards. Like, there's a lot of depth, and that's good, because it's a long season. Injuries are going to happen. So having that kind of depth is going to help them. I mean, 5th in the East, 12th overall, that's about as low as I would put the Hawks. They're going to be a good team, but I don't know that they're going to be that good. All right, next we have the Bucks. And here, at 13, a team with Giannis. Giannis is still in his prime. Giannis is still in his prime. We've seen that last season. He was really good again last season. He was really good at the FIBA Eurobasket, representing Greece. It's clear the guy can still play. He's still really good, and he's healthy right now, at least. He's had, quite a bit of injuries over this past few years. So part of the ranking there with the Bucks at 13 is, and 6 in the East is not quite sure, like if Giannis going to play 80 games or is he going to play 60? Like, especially if they are like not top 3 in the East, not top 2 or 4 in the East. Like they might rest him a little bit here and there to try to get like a better draft pick maybe. Because I just don't know. Like they don't have a good enough supporting cast around Giannis to really be like a top 2 or 3 or even top 4 team in the East. So, that's kind of plays into the ranking that I have them there at 13 overall, 6th in the East. It's a balance. I just think the supporting cast they have around him is decent. It's decent. You got Turner, and you got some other guys that are okay, that are pretty good. Cole Anthony and Kevin Porter, like they're pretty good players. Kuzma's okay. Like they got some vets, and Bobby Portis, like some pretty good players, but they're not that good. So, and their coaching is a little suspect. So I don't know about putting the Bucks that much higher, but I just think with Giannis as good as he is, and the supporting cast is okay, I can't really put them lower than this either. So I got them at 13. Number 14, this tier, we got a bunch of teams in this tier, 14 to 19. This is a really interesting group of teams, I think. Mavericks, Spurs, Sixers, Celtics, Grizzlies, Blazers. It's an interesting group. Some of these teams in this group could end up being really good. They, might get to the second round of the playoffs, maybe. Some of these teams aren't even going to make the playoffs at all. Some will be in the play-in. It's that, it's an interesting mix. These teams, their seasons could go in a lot of different directions. Mavericks, I just think, they're a veteran team. They're a veteran team. They've got a lot of good pieces, a lot of good players, but, and they also added Cooper Flag. Cooper Flag, I think on one hand, he's a rookie. He's a rookie. There's going to be a learning curve. There's going to be an adjustment period of adjusting to the NBA game and the speed of the game, the physicality. I think he's going to be really good on defense. Offense might be a work in progress, especially if the 3 ball doesn't quite translate. It is a deeper 3-point line. I think some people forget about that. They just think, oh, he was pretty good shooting in college. That'll just automatically translate to the NBA. Well, he's really young, A, and B, it's a deeper 3 point line, and you're facing tougher competition. Like he's a rookie. He's going to be really good. I think there's a pretty good chance he'll get Rookie of the Year, especially since like Dylan Harper is kind of, there's this log jam where it's not like Dylan Harper went to a team where he's just going to be the guy and get tons of on ball reps and be the point guard and run the show and get tons of shots up. Dylan Harper went to a team, where they have Castle and Fox and Wemby. There's a lot of other guys that need the ball in their hands. There's other guys that can play point guard and bring the ball up. Harper's going to be just kind of another guy there. So Flag's probably going to be Rookie of the Year. But anyways, I don't want to bounce around here too much. Mavericks at 14. Let's face it here. Like Klay Thompson is good, but he's getting really old. He's probably going to be load managed quite a bit. Anthony Davis, he's healthy now, but how long is that going to last? How many games is he really going to play? Kyrie Irving, obviously we know coming off the torn ACL, he's expected back January, but a lot of people thinking it might not be till later than that. So there's a lot of things here that, I think they'll be pretty good. They'll be like middle of the pack somewhere, in that like 14, 15 range. But I just don't know about ranking them too high. They got some good players, like PJ Washington's a good player, and Gafford's a good player, and Derek Lively. There's some pretty good depth. There's some good players. So I think, they're a top 14, top 15 team in the league, but I don't know about putting them higher than that. Next at 15, I got the Spurs. I think that's a pretty fair ranking for them. I think Spurs fans, there's a lot of reason for hope and optimism. They went out and they got some guys. They got some guys to add to the team, this season. So they're going to improve quite a bit compared to last season. Last season, they're basically tanking to try to get a high draft pick. They shut down Wemby. They shut down Fox. Those two guys missed a lot of games, and that's why their record was pretty bad. And they also had their coaching situation. Popovich was out for a while, and then, Mitch was like the interim guy. Like now Mitch is the guy, and he can put his stamp on that team as the guy and have a little bit more coaching experience now. Obviously he's not going to be Pop. He's not going to be Popovich. So there's going to be a little bit probably of like a downgrade, from Popovich to Mitch in there. I think Wemby is going to be really good. Wemby is going to be a beast as long as he's healthy. Like he has had some issues staying healthy and being able to not only stay healthy, but be able to handle a lot of minutes and a lot of games. When he was a rookie, they kind of limited his minutes and limited how many games he played to try to keep him healthy. Then in year 2, he didn't stay healthy. So now in year 3, what's going to happen? How much is he going to play? Can he stay healthy? If he's healthy, Wemby's going to be a monster this season, and that's part of the reason why I do have them ranked as a top 15 team in the league, even though they haven't really been very high. They haven't ranked very high in the standings for these past few years. But I think Harper's going to be good. Castle's going to be even better than he was last year. Fox will be probably healthier. Wemby's going to be healthier. Sohan should hopefully be a little bit better. Vassell is Vassell. He's a good, solid player that can hit shots and, be a 3-and-D guy. Kornet and Olynyk are solid pickups for them. Like, they have a lot of pieces there. I don't know how much Carter Bryant's going to play in year 1. I think in year 1, he's probably just going to be a guy that can maybe hit some threes here and there and play some really good defense, coming off the bench a little bit. Barnes, a veteran. Like, it's a veteran team. It's an interesting mix of veterans with youth. But I think, there's enough talent and depth there, along with a guy that's probably going to be a top 5 player in the league in Wemby. If he's healthy enough, he's going to be a top 5 or 6 player in the league. And you have enough talent and depth around him that, like, top 15 is should definitely be attainable for that Spurs team. um, at 16, I got the Sixers. Sixers, Celtics, Grizzlies, Blazers, like this next few teams, they're pretty interchangeable. I'm just seeing on Twitter, about how the injury with Jared McCain. I looked that up. Looks like for that type of injury, the recovery timeline can be anywhere between 4 to 8 weeks for that finger. What is it? Thumb injury he had. And we're like a month away from the season even starting. So he might not miss any of the season. If it's like a 4 week recovery and the season starts in 4 weeks, McCain might not miss any of the season. Like but I'm thinking like young player coming off an injury that he had last season. Like they're gonna be cautious with him. So he might miss the first few weeks, but I don't think that's gonna derail their season too much. But it just kind of adds to the fact that this Sixers team, man, you got McCain, you got Embiid, and Paul George, like three very key important pieces for them. Like it's probably three of their top four players, all with significant injury concerns and injury risk and, guys coming off injuries, guys who had surgeries. Like I got Sixers at 16 here, but I can't really put them any higher than that. I could see a case to maybe put the Sixers at like 14 or 15, like maybe put them higher. But, you know, with Paul George and Embiid, they're getting up there in age and there's injury concerns and, there's injury risk with McCain as well. And they just were pretty bad last year. They're obviously going to be better than they were last season, but because it can't possibly really get any worse from a health standpoint with McCain and Embiid and Paul George. But I don't know how much better it's really going to get from a health standpoint for those guys to be much higher than like 16th in the NBA. And I think VJ is going to be good, but he's a rookie, and there's going to be a learning curve for VJ getting used to playing at the NBA level. And the Sixers, they lost some other key players. They lost Yabusele, and the Quentin Grimes situation. We don't know what's going to happen there. Is he going to be even on the team? So I think the Sixers, like I can't really put them any higher than 16 at this point, and even I'm not even sure, especially with the McCain. Like I did these rankings, full disclosure, before I heard about the McCain news. I might put them like a spot or two lower. I don't know. I think with the Celtics and Grizzlies, Blazers, you can maybe argue putting one of them, over the Sixers, but like the Celtics at 17, I think that's a fair ranking. I think like obviously it's like, okay, who do they have at power forward? Who do they have at the 4? Who do they have at the 5? Like if the main guys you're going to be playing at the 4 is like Sam Hauser and Jordan Walsh, Josh Minot, and Chris Boucher, and at the 5 you got Chris Boucher, you got Josh Minot, at the 5 you got Chris Boucher, you've got Xavier Tillman, Neemias Queta, and Luka Garza. I mean, like, yeah, they have good players at the 1, 2, and 3 spots, but if that's what you got at the 4 and the 5, and Jason Tatum is out, Jason Tatum's out probably for the whole season. Porzingis is gone, Horford's gone, Drew Holiday's gone. I think Celtics at 17 is fine. I think that's a fair ranking. They might end up, sneaking up a little bit higher. I don't think they're a top 10 team in the NBA. I don't think anybody thinks that. Maybe they end up being somewhere in that like 11 to 15 range somewhere. Maybe they end up being a little higher if things really fall into place and they really click. But I think one thing with the Celtics is they're probably going to be relying pretty heavily on guys like Queta and Garza and Minot and Jordan Walsh, Baylor Shireman, Hugo Gonzalez. Like that group of guys that I just said, like Xavier Tillman, we don't know like what pretty much any of those guys can do at the NBA level. I mean, some of those guys are more proven than others, but like some of those guys are very, very unproven at the NBA level, and there's going to be a lot of minutes that they need from that group to contribute something. So it's kind of an interesting team. It's like they have that group that I just mentioned that are pretty much unproven, and then you have guys like Pritchard and Hauser and Anthony Simons, Jaylen Brown, and Derek White. That group is very proven. So it's interesting dynamic in that group that I just mentioned. Those five guys who are very proven have played in NBA Finals and won NBA Finals MVPs and won all defensive teams like Derek White and Sixth Man of the Year Peyton Pritchard, and Anthony Simons has been very productive in terms of his ability to score the basketball, shoot the basketball, hit threes on volume from and efficiency at a young age, and do it year after year after year, on high usage. I mean, the guy's very talented. Like, the talent they have is enough for me to put them, like at that 17 spot. I don't know about putting them lower than that. Plus, I think they do have good coaching, so they have enough good players, enough good coaching. Like, I probably wouldn't put them lower than 17. I think that's a fair spot to rank the Celtics, in the preseason here. All right, moving on. Grizzlies at 18. I think Grizzlies versus Blazers, it's like, okay, which team is better? Grizzlies versus Blazers, like they might be battling each other for like a play-in spot, or something like that. One of those like in the 8, 9, 10, 11 range in the West. I think like the Grizzlies, like, I don't know. They're not going to be terrible. I don't think they're going to be terrible, but I'm curious about how good, like some of these teams, it's like, how good can the Celtics going to be without Tatum for most of the season, maybe the entire season? With the Grizzlies, it's like, how good are they going to be without Desmond Bane? We have not seen this Grizzlies team without Desmond Bane on it for a long time. He was there for 5 years. And that's pretty much the whole time Ja Morant was in the league. Like, we know Ja is good and Jaren Jackson is good. Like, we haven't seen Ja and Jaren Jackson without Bane yet. Yeah, like they lost Bane and they got Ty Jerome, but Ty Jerome is not Desmond Bane. Like, and yeah, they got Contavious Caldwell Pope as well. So like Caldwell Pope's pretty good, Jerome's pretty good. Hopefully they'll have some more health. With hopefully Gigi Jackson coming back and Jalen Wells coming back. Like, they got some wings that could play. And, I think Cedric Howard is going to be pretty good, but he's going to be a rookie. He's going to be a rookie. There's going to be some learning, but I think he'll be pretty good. And Brandon Clark's coming off a pretty serious knee injury. So how good is he going to be? Aldama's pretty good. I think with Clark and Aldama and Edey and Jaren Jackson, like, that's a pretty good front line. I think you have like some good wings. You have like some good players up front. You got Ja and you got Ty Jerome and you got Pippen in the backcourt. Like, there's enough good players and enough depth and talent there, that I wouldn't put the Grizzlies lower than 18. I mean, I think, you could put the Grizzlies a little bit higher. If you have the Grizzlies in that 14 to 17 range, I wouldn't really argue. I mean, I got all these teams 14 to 19, they're all in the same tier, so I got them at 18, but if you have them a little higher, that's fine. I got some questions about their coaching. Like, they have a new coach, that we don't know how he's going to do. Is he going to be good? He's going to be bad? Like, we don't know with the Grizzlies. It's a little bit of a question mark, which leads me into the 19th spot, Blazers. I also have a question mark. I'm not quite sure how good of a coach Billups is. He's been there for a while. He's kind of started to maybe a little bit last season start to find his groove as a coach where they start building an identity, as like this defensive team, which I don't know if that's by design, because that's what those Pistons teams that Billups was on when they were really good and they won a championship. It was all about defense, and that was their identity was defense first, and not really having one or two star players that the offense was built around. And that's kind of what the Blazers this year's Blazers team is kind of like that as well, where you're like, okay, who's the best player? Who's the best scorer on the Blazers? With Simon's gone, like who's going to lead them in scoring? Who's going to be able to drop 20, 25 a night on this Blazers team? Who's going to be able to go and get a bucket for them? And that's a question. That's part of the reason why I have them, down there at 19. You could maybe put them a little bit higher, but I'm just not sure they have enough offense. Not fully sold on the coaching there. And I don't know if they have they might need to continue to try to shift the culture. Like this Blazers team, it's been a long time now that they've been struggling. Like I kind of need to believe it. It's like I need to see it to believe it with this Blazers team in order for me to rank them above teams that, teams like the Grizzlies and the Celtics and the Sixers, teams that actually have played in the playoffs, like guys on their roster on that same team, like lots of players on this Celtics team have played playoff games for the Celtics. Same things with the Grizzlies. Like I need to see it to believe it, to put the Blazers higher. Not quite sure that their culture has turned around enough that they're actually going to be like a winning, like legit playoff contending team. So I got them at 19, but they're, again, they're in the same tier with these teams, in this 14 to 19 range. So I do think they're going to be pretty good. At 20, we got the Raptors. What do you got to say about the Raptors? Like, I got them at 20. I think that's fine. They're like this range of teams, like the Raptors and Kings, and like the Heat, Pacers, Suns, Hornets, this 20 to 25 tier. They're all teams that I think are going to be lottery teams that there's a chance if things break right, they can maybe sneak in to the play in. And maybe if things really go well for them, they end up as like a 7 or 8 seed. That's what the Raptors are. I think there's some reason for optimism. Like I'm a big fan of Colin Murray Boyles. I think Colin Murray Boyles is really good. He's a rookie though, so there's going to be, a learning curve, but I think there's a pretty good chance, I think he'll be one of the better rookies in the NBA this season because he's strong. He's not going to have to adjust too much from a physical standpoint because he's probably the strongest rookie in this rookie class, physically. And, being able to just come in from day one and just be not only really strong, really high IQ, high feel, but a really good defender who can also pass, can get rebounds. Just seems like a guy that can just come in from day one and contribute. So I think that's going to help them win. Polittle is a solid big man at center, and we'll see how healthy they are. I mean, obviously Brandon Ingram has had a lot of injuries and health concerns, in these past few years. But if Ingram's healthy, and these other guys are healthy enough, like Barnes and Barrett and Quickly, Quickly and Ingram have had a lot of injuries. But if these guys are healthy, they could end up more in that 14 to 17 range on this list. They could be up a little bit higher. But I'm not sure about the health. I'm not sure about how all these pieces are going to fit together and really gel. I don't know, kind of similar situation with the Blazers. Can they really turn this culture around? Are they a winning team? Do they have that winning DNA? I don't know. Moving on to the Kings, the Kings at 21, I think on one hand, it's I think they have enough talent on paper. On paper, there's talent. When you have Sabonis and you have Keegan Murray and you've got Malik Monk, DeMar DeRozan, and Zach LaVine. I mean, that's that's a group of 5 players that are all very good basketball players. I mean, if you have those 5 guys, there's enough talent that 21 in the league, Like you should be a top 21 team with that kind of talent. Um, now question is like, how do these pieces all fit together? A, B, who the heck is going to play point guard? Well, there's Dennis Schroeder, so Dennis Schroeder is going to get a lot of those minutes at point guard, and that's another guy who's got talent. So you got those five guys that I already named, plus you got Dennis Schroeder. Like that's six good players. The pieces don't all fit together. I don't know if there's really enough defense. I'm concerned. I'm pretty concerned about the defense the Kings are going to play, um, which is one of the reasons why they're down there at 21 and not higher. But at some point, like those six players that I just said are like, that's enough talent that if you're lower than 21, like something's probably gone wrong. Either things are really not gelling correctly or they got a lot of injuries, but I got them there at 21. But I also have concerns about how these pieces are going to fit. DeRozan's getting old. Levine has never really been a winning NBA player. Schroeder, great FIBA player, yeah, when he's playing for Germany, but there's been questions about how much he contributes to winning at the NBA level and how much guys like to play with him. And it's also sometimes tough to win with a guy like Sabonis, who's a big that isn't a great shooter and he's not a great defender. Like, who's going to play interior defense? Who's going to protect the rim for this team? If you got Keegan Murray at the 4, Sabonis at the 5, who's defending the rim? Who's playing interior defense close to the basket? I just don't know how it's all going to fit for them. So I got them at 21. 22, I got the Pacers. I think, with the amount of coaching with Carlisle that they have, and even with Halliburton out for the year, there's enough talent with Siakam and Nesmith and Nemhard and McConnell. That, you got good players. And Toppin's a good player. There's some good pieces there and some good coaching. 22 is as low as I can go with them. I mean, they're going to be competitive. They're going to fight and they're going to scrap and they're going to claw and they're going to be pretty competitive. Matherin's going to have like another year of development. Maybe Jarris Walker takes a leap and is able to get better and improve and contribute more. Can't really put them lower than 22. That leads into the Heat. The Heat, I think, have enough talent, and I think they have enough coaching to, it's hard for me to put them lower than 23. When you have a duo, when you got Bam and Hero is a solid duo. They can, you got Bam is one of the best defensive players in the league who can also get you 20 points a game. Hero can get you 20, 25 a game. Like, you got those pieces. You've got arguably the best coach in the league. You've got some other pieces that around them that are pretty good. I got them at 23. With that being said, they were pretty bad after Jimmy Butler got hurt or after Jimmy Butler was traded. Without Jimmy Butler last season, they were not very good. Even with Jimmy Butler the last couple of years, they weren't so great. And I just don't know if there's enough there outside of Bam and Hero to really, to put them any higher than 23. I just have questions about some of the rest of the roster, really. I mean, they're trying to get rid of Terry Rozier, obviously. There's like rumors during the offseason that they're not sure like Kel'el Ware is working hard enough and stuff like this. I don't know. I just have some questions about the rest of the roster. I think Fontecchio is going to be a pretty good pickup. I think Davion Mitchell seems to be a good fit for that team. So they're going to be pretty competitive. They might go into the play-in tournament. Like I got them at 23. I can't really put them any lower than that because they have a decent amount of pretty good players and they have arguably the best coach in the league. So hard to put the Heat any lower than 23. I think in the Spoelstra era, I don't know if they've ever really been lower than that in the NBA. And then at 24, the Suns. What can you say about the Suns? I mean, they're kind of, there's talent. There's talent. Like, Dylan Brooks is one of the best defenders in the league. He's a really good wing defender. He's tough. He's physical. Brings that edge, so you don't mess with him. And, like Dylan Brooks teams are usually good. They usually are competitive. A team with him on them is like, he makes the defense better. He just makes teams more competitive. He's tough and he's gritty and he's physical. And, Booker is a really good player. Jalen Green is, he's a pretty good player. And I have questions though with the Suns. Who plays point guard and who plays center? They have some guys at center. You got Malawach, you got Nick Richards, and you got Mark Williams. Like, those are pretty good players, but like, they're all pretty unproven. I mean, Richards is like proven as a backup. We don't really know if he's a starter. Then the other two guys, Mark Williams is pretty good. Like, Malawach is just going to be a rookie. He's going to need some development. For a center rotation, like, that's okay for like a play-in team, I guess. And then they have no point guard. Durant's gone, Beal's gone. I just don't know about how all those pieces really fit together on that team. One thing I do like is Nigel Hayes Davis. It's a guy that I think a lot of people watching this video, a lot of people that watch the NBA, probably aren't that familiar with Nigel Hayes Davis, but the guy was really good over in Europe, like maybe the best player in Europe, and he's still in his prime. I was thinking about putting the Suns a little bit lower, like I was like, okay, should I put the Suns or Hornets? Hornets or Suns? Who do I think is better? And like, I was like, I think Nigel Hayes Davis could actually be pretty good for that team, along with the other pieces they have, and with Dylan Brooks, and the center rotation might not be too bad. So I put the Suns over the Hornets, barely. Hornets at 25. I just think they're kind of, they're just a young rebuilding team still. They're young, they're rebuilding. I don't know if they're really quite there yet to take that next step as a team. I don't know if they have enough talent, enough depth, enough good players. Charles Lee is still kind of finding, and developing as a head coach. We don't know yet quite how good he's going to be as a head coach at the NBA level. And like we got to see how good is Con Knippel going to be. He's just a rookie. I think he'll be pretty good. I think maybe he'll end up being like a Ty Jerome kind of guy. But in year one, there's maybe going to be. I think he's the type of guy who could come in from day one and be pretty good. Just come in, know how to play, make some good passes, put the ball on the floor a little bit, hit some shots. I think he'll be a pretty good rookie. But if he's like your third best player, like, they're probably not going to be that good, because you got LaMelo and Brandon Miller. That's your top two guys. Who's your third guy? Con? I don't know. If he's your third guy, and you got Grant Williams and Pat Connaughton, some decent veterans, which, the veterans that they have, and Plumlee, like, that's why I do have them at 25. I'm not putting the Hornets lower than 25. I think they're going to be pretty competitive. They're going to win some games. They'll be pretty good. They'll be okay, but they're, I just don't know about the depth beyond, like, who's your third, who's your fourth, who's your fifth, sixth, seventh best player, like, and your top two guys, LaMelo and Brandon Miller. A, they've had a lot of problems staying healthy, and B, I don't know how much defense those guys play and how much as a team they're going to really be able to defend. So I don't know. Like, the Hornets, they're not going to be terrible, but I can't really put them higher than 25. And then I got Pelicans and Bulls. Pelicans and Bulls in a tier just on their own. So I don't think those teams are quite going to be as bad as the bottom three, where I have, Jazz, Nets, Wizards. But Pelicans and Bulls, like, I don't know. They're just they're a little bit of a notch, just barely a tier below these other teams with the Heat, Suns, Hornets. They're just a little bit of a tier below. Pelicans, like, I don't know about their coaching. Like, I think Willie Green might be gone, halfway through the season. I don't know how good of a coach he is, how much I really buy Zion. Like, yeah, Zion looks like he's in good shape, but how many games is he really going to play? Like, he's still, at the end of the day, one of the most injury-prone players in the league. We haven't been able to see him play consistently, stay on the floor. Jordan Poole hasn't really been a winning player for most of his career, especially during his tenure in Washington. Takes a lot of erratic shots. And I like, I think Poole's a pretty good player. He's won a championship. Kevon Looney's won a championship. That's two guys that won championships in Golden State. So that's a couple, those pickups, they can help them win some games. And if Zion's in shape and, Murray can play pretty well, we'll see how he does coming back from the injury. That's part of the reason why they're ranked a little bit lower. But you got Herb Jones, you got Trey Murphy, you've got enough talent. You've got some talent, you got some depth, you got some veterans that they should be like no lower than 26. Like they might even end up being a little bit higher than 26th in the NBA. But there's some talent. Yves Missy, he should be a little bit better in year two than he was in year one, and he was pretty good in year one. So Missy as a backup, you got Looney as a veteran. Like, there's some good players, and of course, I haven't even mentioned Queen and Fears, the rookies. Like, I think and Queen's injured, but if they can develop a bit, if they can develop and come along, I mean, if you're relying on two guys like that, two rookies that weren't even top five picks, and Fears is really young, Queen's injured right now, so I don't think you can be expecting too much from them as rookies, but a team that's relying on them quite a bit probably isn't going to be ranked super high in the league. But I think Jose Alvarado gives them some defense, and you got guys like Alvarado, you got Zion, you got Murphy, you got Herb Jones, you got Looney and Poole and Murray. Like, that's enough pieces and enough veterans and depth and talent that they could be a little bit higher. They could be in this like 18 to 23 range. 26 is just kind of because I think that overall as a team, I just don't know where they're going. And like, I just don't know what the direction of the team is with the Pelicans. And it just seems pretty disjointed. I don't know if they really have that winning culture. I don't know how healthy they're going to be and how much coaching they have. So I got them down there at 26. 27, I got the Bulls. And, we got the Bulls there at 27. I just think, like, they're going to be down. They're going to be down pretty far in the league, but I don't quite have them at the very bottom, in that bottom tier with the Jazz, Nets, and Wizards, just because I think, like, they got some talent. There's some talent there, like Bazelis and Kobe White and Giddey. Like, if that's your core, like, you're probably not very good. They're going to be down pretty low, but I think they're going to be pretty competitive. At the same time, like, this is a Bulls team that always seems to just be in that play-in tournament. They just seem to be determined to be in the play-in tournament so they can be kind of good and not be terrible. But it's like, why don't you just tank to try to get a higher draft pick? Like, why do you always want to be in the play-in tournament? Wouldn't you rather get a better draft pick so you can get like a top 3, top 2, top 5 pick in the draft to actually get a player in the draft who's good enough to actually turn your franchise around and build around them and actually build like a team that can maybe compete for a championship? They just keep getting these picks that are these draft picks that are in like the 8 to 14 range, and it's hard to build, around those types of picks. Vucevic, I think, is a pretty good player. Like, they have enough talent. Like, you go like get like Vucevic and Kobe White and Giddey and Bazelis is going to be pretty good. I think Noah Asenge is going to be decent. He's going to be a decent rookie. He's going to, he's going to be some moments where you're like, oh gosh, this guy's so raw. But then there's other times when he's going to look pretty good and really make an impact out there. And you're going to be like, whoa, this guy's awesome. So I think they're going to like have moments when they're going to be pretty competitive, but they're also going to be kind of bad as well. 3 teams at the bottom: Jazz, Nets, and Wizards. To kind of wrap this video up, why I have the Jazz higher than the other two. A, I think Hardy's a pretty good coach. I think they have pretty good coaching. And B, I just think Lauri Markkanen is better than anybody that the Nets or Wizards have. So they have arguably better coaching than those other teams, and probably the better player than the other two teams, and a decent amount of young talent. You got some young talent there. Guys like Keontae George and Collier, Sensabaugh, Ace Bailey, Clayton. I mean, it's kind of like a G League team to some extent. There's just so many young players, so many minutes for all these young players that to some extent it's like a G League team, which is why I do have them in that bottom three. But Walker Kessler's a good player. And Lauri Markkanen's a good player. Like Taylor Hendricks could take a little bit of a leap this season. Hopefully Cody Williams isn't as bad as last season. Like, there's some talent, there's some depth. Like it could come to fruition to some extent so that they're not quite as bad as those other two teams at the bottom. And then Nets and Wizards, I think, like, why do I have the Nets a little bit higher? I just think they maybe have a little tiny bit more talent and depth overall, and like veterans that just are like actually good basketball players that are developed more. Guys like Michael Porter Jr. that are just like, he's developed. He's won a championship. Like he knows how to play. He can hit shots. He's an established, proven NBA player. Whereas, a team like the Wizards, they're relying really heavily on a bunch of guys that are less proven. You're relying really heavily on guys like Sarr and Koulibaly and Trey Johnson. And I think the Nets have a little bit better coaching as well. Jordi Fernandez seems like, last season, he always had that team playing better than what their talent level was. You're like looking at the standings, and you're like, why don't they just tank? Like, don't they want a better draft pick? Like, they should just tank. But like, he seemed to get the most out of their talent because of his coaching. So like, even putting the Nets at 29 seems a little off, but I just think the roster that they have, the Nets, like, come on, they're either 29 or 30. Like, look at that roster. And then the Wizards roster as well is basically like a G League, team with all these young players. With the Nets, with some of the veterans that they have, guys like Terrence Mann and Claxton. Cam Thomas is kind of like a veteran at this point. And the coaching, I think their coaching is a little bit better than the Wizards. Some of the veterans, the talent, the depth. That's why I got the Nets just higher than the Wizards. The Wizards, like, they have pretty much no veterans. Like, let's be honest, man. They're just a bunch of young guys that are, their closest thing to a veteran pretty much is Corey Kispert. Good player, like a guy that's going to hit shots and help to keep them somewhat competitive. But like, they're just not enough veterans for them to really be competitive. The thing I do like about the Wizards, like, they have some good young talent. There's a lot of there's young talent that if they just stay the course, if they just keep at it, they just keep developing. It's going to take time. It might take another couple years, but the hope is for the Wizards, you get lucky in the lottery. Obviously, there's like 3 guys at the top of the draft in 2026. Obviously, the Wizards are hoping to get lucky in the lottery. They wanted to get lucky in the lottery last year. They wanted a top 2 or 3 pick last year. They didn't get it. Had to settle for Trey Johnson, who's not really a guy you can just like build a team around. He can be a supporting piece. All the guys that they have in Washington are guys that can be a supporting piece, whether it's, Koulibaly and Sarr and Trey Johnson and some of these other guys. You need a guy that you can really build around. I think that's what, the Wizards are hoping. They get lucky in the lottery this year. I think they're hoping to get like a top 2 or 3 pick in 2026 and get that guy. And then maybe get one more piece in, maybe one more top 4 or 5 pick in 2027. And then hopefully that's it. Hopefully you got enough young pieces. You got a good enough young core that you can then try to build towards a playoff run in like 2-3 years is what the Wizards' obvious hope is. But right now, they're just, in terms of talent and depth and veterans that know how to play and are good basketball players, and coaching, Like, I got the Wizards at 30. I don't know. I mean, maybe they'll end up being a little bit higher than that. I mean, I think they're going to have some games where they're going to pull off some upsets. They're going to beat some teams that are ranked higher than them. Like, that's just how it is. But I got the Wizards at 30. That's where my power rankings are at right now, and that's why I have them ranked in these tiers and in this order that I have right now as it stands on September 25th, 2025. Still a few more weeks till the season tips off, but I wanted to make this video just kind of, I don't know, have some fun and share my thoughts, and hopefully you enjoyed watching this. I know it doesn't have like fancy graphics or anything like that. It's just like this spreadsheet and it's me talking. Um, but I just think one thing I just want to close with is all these teams. I kind of mentioned this, like pretty much everybody, all the teams like from 11 down, from the Clippers on down, Clippers, Bucks, Spurs, Sixers, all these teams from 11 on down. One thing that you heard me continue to say was, well, this team, you could actually make a case that they could be a few spots higher. I kept saying, like, oh, yeah, this team, they're at 14, but like, it wouldn't shock me if they're like more like 10 or 11, or this team's at 25, but they could end up being like 20 or 21. You could make a case that they're like 19 or 20. And the reason for that is the NBA this season is deep. It's deep and it's competitive. It's been like that for the last few years. I think these last few years we've seen like more depth and talent in the NBA than pretty much any time in NBA history. And because there's so much talent in the NBA, there's enough talent to go around for all 30 teams to have a pretty good amount of talent. So all these teams have really good players, and so even teams down lower like the Heat and the Suns and Hornets and Pelicans and Bulls and Jazz, like some of these teams are actually pretty good. So don't be thinking like, oh, you got them at 27 and you got them at 30 or 26, 25. Like even these teams in the 20s and the Wizards at 30, like they're going to have some upsets. They're going to beat some people. They're going to have games where you're like, whoa, where did that come from? And I'm not going to be surprised by it because all of these teams have really good players. They all have talent. And anybody can beat anybody on any given night. It's a deep league, and it's going to be a fun season with how much depth and talent there is in the NBA this season. All right, that's it. Thanks for watching.